Okay, so I think we're on the hour. Thank you ever so much for joining our event today, Unlocking the Power of Azure Integration Services in Manufacturing and Logistics and Distribution Sectors. What I want to do is just run through a little bit of housekeeping before we move straight on to the agenda and then the exciting part as to what it is we've been doing with one of our lovely clients, Expand, and hopefully also to understand in a bit more detail what the technology can offer and how it can potentially support you. So as you will have seen, the event is being recorded today. So if you don't wish to use the audio and want to post questions in the chat, please feel free to do so. And also, just to let you know that one of my colleagues will be running some polls in the background today as well, asking for your opinion on certain questions, and we'd be ever so grateful if you can take part in those. So moving on to the agenda. Obviously, we've done the introduction and welcome. So what we're going to be looking at today is exploring Azure Integration Services, or AIS, and its core components, as well as I've already mentioned, talking to Chris Pye from Expand, and then look at hearing from our colleague over in Microsoft regarding how Azure Integration Services can support an organisation, and our own Jeff Ballard as well. As you will see on the right, you can see the list of speakers that will be taking you through the webinar today, and they will introduce themselves in a bit more detail at the beginning of each of their sessions. So just a quick overview of Transparity. Don't worry, these are only going to be a couple of slides, but effectively, just to give you a bit of information as to who we are if you don't know, we are one of the most accredited, if not the most accredited, UK Microsoft partner. We're 100% focused on Microsoft Cloud, and we have been delivering professional services across the entire Microsoft ecosystem since 2015. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Abdullah, who is going to talk through exploring AIS and its core components. Abdullah, over to your good self.
Brilliant. Thank you, Susanna. Good afternoon, everyone. So in the next 10 to 15 minutes or so, I will give a brief on Azure Integration Services, what are the benefits of having an integration middleware, and how it all fits together. My name is Abdullah, and I am a data, apps, and AI technology specialist at Microsoft, and I'm very much looking forward to sharing some thoughts with you today. So before I talk about the what and the how, I want to start with why. So companies typically have a vast number of applications that they have to manage. And these applications typically don't operate in vacuum. So for example, placing an order often requires communication between several systems. So customer database, inventory system, payment processor, warehouse management system, etc. So this process alone might engage a dozen distinct applications. And this is an example of a business process. So a single task might involve several systems. And you can certainly integrate between these different systems by writing custom code connections between every pair. But you can imagine this becomes very unscalable to build and maintain, because each connection requires different protocols, data formats, error handling, etc. And beyond business processes, we're starting to see requirements to integrate in a business-to-business scenario as well. So exposing services or information to third parties via APIs, or even leveraging third-party APIs. And each of these connections require different authentication protocols, rate limiting steps, etc., etc. And we're seeing that applications are no longer just a monolith. So we're seeing microservices being built where every service operates as an individual application. So how do we make sure that we communicate between these applications reliably? Last but not least, how do we also share business functions within an organization? So one part of a business exposing functionalities to other parts of the business via an API as an example. So my main point is that integration requirements are there, and they will only grow more and more. Now, to handle all of these requirements, we need an integration middleware that can connect all of these different systems in a scalable way. It must be easy to maintain and must be reliable as well. So Microsoft had a product in the past and still has called BizTalk Server, which you may have come across. And for those who don't know, BizTalk was actually just an SDK before it was an actual server. But this was Microsoft's first step into the integration space. Then 15 years ago, Azure landed, and that included integration services capabilities with a collection of different technologies. Everything that you're seeing on this slide, basically, and I will go through that in a bit. But before I talk about the technology, which are Azure Logic Apps, functions, event grid, etc., I really want to start from first principles. So fundamentally with integration, we are simply moving data from A to B. Yes, we're trying to integrate or connect between different systems, but at the core of that is really moving data from A to B. And it could be a file sent on a schedule every night. It could be data in JSON format shared via an API. It could be event-driven, where data is shared via a message or an event, where the communication is asynchronous and not direct. So any integration middleware will support moving data from A to B, and more importantly, it needs to make sure that it supports different connectivity protocols. So HTTP, MQTT, FTP, etc. And two, it needs to make sure that it can handle translations as well, because sometimes systems speak different languages. So how do we make sure that system A's data format makes sense to system B? So converting between JSON and XML as an example, handling different date formats, etc. And the third is reliability. How do we actually ensure that data gets from A to B, even when things go wrong? Now, that's a lot of overhead to write in your code, which is why these integration middlewares exist. And you get all of that as part of Azure Integration Services, which is a series of different products or building blocks, which gives you the flexibility to tailor to your own integration scenario. And at the heart of Azure Integration Services is Azure Logic Apps. So it's essentially a visual workflow designer with built-in connectors that allows you to integrate with different services. So each workflow starts with a trigger, it could be an HTTP call, it could be a schedule, and then it runs a series of actions and then calls an output. It's enterprise grade with built-in retry policies, error handling, and monitoring. So what I would say is use Logic Apps when you want workflow orchestration scenarios and you want to coordinate between different systems. And next, I want to move into function apps. And sometimes Azure Function is branded as an integration tool. Other times it's branded as just a background job. Sometimes it's just an easy way to host backend APIs. And all of the above is true. But within the context of integrations, Azure Functions can be used to fill in the gaps. So sure, Logic Apps can do many things via drag and drop interfaces, but sometimes you get to a point where you just need to write code, and Azure Functions can fill in some of these gaps. The third thing I want to talk about is API management. So API management is essentially a solution to manage, govern, and expose your APIs to consumers, whoever that consumer is. It consists of an API gateway that connects to your internal and external APIs, a management pane that allows you to manage and govern these APIs, and a developer portal where you can expose these APIs with subscriptions. You can apply throttling on APIs. You can apply layer 7 activities like caching, SSL offloading, etc., or even third-party versioning as well. So for example, if you are leveraging external APIs and suddenly they change their API version, you can go back to engineering and let them make these changes in the code, or you can do that transformation in the API management layer without changing a single line of code and having to redeploy. So many organizations actually use Azure API management as a secure entry point to Logic Apps, which is sort of like the orchestrator of this entire flow. And then the last thing I want to talk about is events and messages. So the reason why I put all these together in the same slide is because they all fall under the umbrella of event-driven communication. So what do I mean by that? Instead of relying on direct calls between systems, we simply communicate via messages or events. So we send a message or an event to a middle broker that then sends it to a consumer. So it's not a direct call. And we do that for decoupling, we do that for resiliency, and we do that for scalability. So the first question I want to pose is, should we use a message or an event? Now, a message is, think of it as a valuable piece of information that has business value. And there's a contract between the publisher and the consumer. So the publisher expects the consumer to process the message. An order is a perfect example of that, where if I send an order, I, as a publisher, have a good idea what the consumer is going to do with the order, i.e., process it and send it to a customer. Because it has business value, I expect enterprise capabilities in the platform where I, as a developer, don't need to handle. And these are things like guaranteed delivery. And if I want to send multiple messages or orders, I want them to be sent in order. And from a developer point of view, that will simplify my code incredibly because I have confidence in the platform that the messages I am reading as a consumer have been sent only once before and in the right order. So in my code, I don't have to track any of that. And you never have to worry about idempotency because the platform handles that for you. Now, for events, it is something interesting that happened. So I have no idea if you think it is interesting. I just think it is. So I will just publish the fact that an event happened, and it's up to you if you think if it is interesting and worth subscribing to. But I have no idea what you will do with the data. So for example, if a new customer has been onboarded or added, we publish that, and each department will decide what to do with that piece of information in their own ways. Very different mechanisms between messages and events. Now, when it comes to events, it falls into two categories. One is basically an instant event or discrete event. So this could be like customer added, which is the example I mentioned. And the other is a stream of multiple events. So this is something like sensors in IoT devices. An example is tracking temperature in a fridge as a supermarket. So if there's a single event of a degree change, that's probably not that interesting, but multiple events over a period of time might be interesting, like reducing by a degree every 10 seconds for 3 minutes, which means something is wrong with the fridge. Now, I'm talking about all of these concepts because there's no point talking about the products if we don't talk about these underlying concepts. And with that, use Service Bus for messaging capabilities, use Event Grid for discrete or instance events, and use Event Hub for streamed events. And the last thing I want to say is there's a fun fact on Event Hub. If you've heard of the Halo shooting game developed by Microsoft, it actually uses Event Hub. So when multiplayers are playing online, more than 1 million events are generated per second. So that's players shooting, reloading, moving, etc., etc. And all of that is ingested to Event Hub, where it is then processed. And that is a simple example of a stream of messages, in this case, in a gaming scenario. So with that being said, I will wrap up here and hand it back to Susanna.
Thank you very much, Abdullah, for that really insightful overview. It is incredible just how much this set of technologies can deliver. And actually now moving on to chat to Chris Pye from Expand, I think what will be really interesting is to understand how this technology in action has supported that organisation. So without further ado, Chris, thank you ever so much for joining the webinar today. And I very much look forward to speaking with you. Perhaps you could begin by telling us a little bit about yourself and your role at Expand.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So, I am the IT strategy manager here at Expand Logistics. I've been here for 5 years, and my role essentially is to ensure that IT and digital solutions match the business goals, essentially. Um, Expand Logistics, bit about Expand Logistics. We're a logistics company, so we offer international and domestic shipping solutions and supply chain solutions for all modes, essentially, including customs regulations. And a big part of our business is 3PL warehousing capabilities and fulfillment.
Thank you very much. So I understand that what you were looking to do was advance your integration capabilities. Why was that, and what was your objection? If you could talk us through that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So, some of our business initiatives are get, keep, grow, and looking at efficiencies. As part of this initiative, our objective was to enhance and broaden our existing integration services and capabilities. Essentially, our aim was to develop a scalable and secure solution to extend integration capabilities for our customers and suppliers and partners, essentially. We wanted to use Azure API management capabilities on top of our existing Azure Logic App infrastructure, and building on that is with the Azure DevOps to advance the automation and include things like version control and things like that. So, yeah.
Fantastic. So can you talk me through a little bit more detail about the actual project itself and the processes that you went through with Transparity in delivering this engagement?
Yeah, of course. So the initial conversations regarding the project were to review and document our existing infrastructure and integration services that we had already. We done some analysis on the requirements and using the Moscow method, must, should, could, and would. And then from there, basically, we developed the DevOps pipeline to ensure that we had a steady footing, beginning with, and then essentially we built on the APIs, developed the APIs behind the scenes, and then essentially built on the logic apps behind that. Essentially, and then we had regular weekly project meetings to demonstrate progress and go through budget and those kind of things.
And how did the project go?
The project was great. It was really good. The outcomes of that basically are that we've got a competitive advantage, really. We've got an agile API gateway now, basically, so that allows us to add plugin services additionally to that to enable us to that. We're faster onboarding, so we've managed to onboard customers as part of this API that we've developed, and it's reduced costs and time to be able to do that. We've enhanced customer satisfaction. We've had improved customer satisfaction by enhancing this API requirement, and we've reduced the manual efforts as well required to integrate these services and partners and customers. So yeah, it's been an overall success.
And I think my final question, a little bit of a cheeky one, but I'm going to go for it anyway, is, of course, what made you pick Transparity as a partner?
The reason we picked Transparity was their strong understanding of the Microsoft services and infrastructure. And basically, yeah, so basically we reviewed a number of partners and Transparity there, and they helped us review our existing infrastructure as well and integration services. So it's been a project of high quality, and we've effectively now got a scalable solution. And the project management side of things is something that actually I'm going to try and take internal as well as how we manage our projects going forward, because it has been a great success. So it's been good.
That's great feedback, and thank you for the insights into how this technology has really made a difference within your business. I appreciate that, Chris. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Jeff Ballard, who's going to take you through the next section of our webinar. Thank you very much.
I'm Jeff Ballard. I'm the technical head of practice for the App Innovation practice at Transparity. The App Innovation practice consists of 25 software engineers, all who specialize in software development for the Microsoft Azure platform. That includes Azure Integration Services, obviously, which is why we're here today. And as a matter of fact, it also includes the fact that we worked with Expand to develop the integrations that I'm going to talk about shortly. But first, I'd like to just walk through a strategy about how to put together an automated integration for an organization. So this is for an organization to integrate with other organizations, which is the case for Expand, but it also, same strategy applies for whether you're integrating systems within your organization. It's loosely based on Microsoft's well-architectured framework for integration work, and we're just going to take you through the high-level steps of what you would do to create an integration like Expand have done fundamentally. So first of all, we would look at what data sets. It's all about data, as Abdullah said earlier. It's all about data. What data sets we need to exchange between the organizations. And these data sets can be things like orders, purchases, invoices, whatever they are. We need to identify what they are. And once we've identified what they are, we need to then evaluate whether it's worthwhile integrating them, because what we're trying to do here is make things better for the organization, improve efficiency by automatically exchanging this data, remove paperwork, remove double keying and all of this kind of stuff. So we identify the benefits of interchanging certain data sets. Once we've done that, we then take a look at which systems in our organization and in the third-party organization that manage that data. Yeah, now this is typically systems like Dynamics 365, Sage, SAP. In Expand's case, CargoWise. These systems are managing this data, and it needs to be exchanged between them to make things more effective. That's basically the bottom line here. They're usually standard systems, and they usually have integration capabilities because these systems are designed with integration in mind, because it's a necessity for everybody to make things better if one system can integrate with another. So once we've identified the systems, both in our organization and the other organization that manage the data sets we're interested in, we then need to look at the data interfaces used by those systems. Most systems have an integration capability, but it's technologically variable. Older systems tend to maybe send CSV files over FTP or something like that, maybe send all the orders as FTP once a night or once an hour. Older systems tend to do it that way. Newer systems tend to have APIs, application programming interfaces, and these allow one program to directly call another program across the internet or internally if necessary, and they're more real-time but more modern. Some have webhooks. Webhooks is where one system can basically say to the other system, please tell me when some data's changed. Subscribe to the data in many effects. And effectively say, okay, I want to know whenever there's a new order or whenever there's a new invoice. And then that second system will make an API call to the first system telling it that there's some new data arrived. And effectively, we don't need to use the same method of integrating between each of these systems because the systems themselves have different capabilities. But effectively, we could end up with integrating with, say, CargoWise using XML Web Services, which is an API-based approach. But we could be talking to SAP just using a normal API, or even a file interchange. Depends on the nature of the system. So we effectively look at the interfaces we're going to use, we look at the data we're going to exchange, and then we look at security. There are lots of things in Azure Integration Services with security, but it's extremely important that whatever we are doing with this integration, we make sure that the data is encrypted as it moves from system A to system B, and we make absolutely sure that we know who we're talking to. Everybody knows who we're talking to, so that we are absolutely sure that when we're sending this data to organization X, that it really is organization X, and vice versa. They need to know that we are who we are. So making sure that the identities of each system are known and trustable, and that the data is encrypted, are key parts of engineering a solution like this. Finally, we have workflows and mappings. Abdullah talked about this as well. Workflows are things like, checking that the stock level is okay before we issue an order, maybe checking that the invoice has been approved before they send the invoice, that kind of thing. These are typically managed using a logic app or something like that. And mappings. We need to make sure that the data between the different systems is mapped. So although, say, for example, SAP has a definition of an invoice, and so does Dynamics 365, and both of those definitions include an invoice number and an invoice date, the fields are going to have different names and different data types. And so what we need to do in all of these cases is map the data we're interested in from one data structure in one system through to the other data structure in the other system. Putting this all together, we can basically get all of the information we need to do an automated integration. And Azure Integration Services is our tool of choice for doing it. It's got everything we need. It's got logic apps for managing workflows and connecting to systems. It's got API management for making sure that the APIs are managed correctly and securely. We've got functions for doing complicated mappings, and we've got service bus and event grid, etc., for managing events and messages. All of the things we need are in Azure Integration Services. It's a nice cloud-based, scalable solution that's resilient, and it's effectively the tool of choice for doing an automated integration from the transparency perspective. They're the basic steps to work through for the creation of an automated integration. What I'd like to do next is just look at the actual integrations that have been put together for Expand. So these are what's really been done. I'm only going to cover them at a high level, but this is what's actually been done. The first and the most important is the Expand Integration API. This integration API is effectively hosted in Azure, developed in Azure Integration Services for Expand. And it's effectively an API. It's got API management in it as the entry point, which manages security and various aspects and throttling and things like that. And that API management can be called by third-party organization, such as a client. Yeah, they will call that API, passing their data in. We've got logic apps managing the workflow, and we've got functions managing the mappings, because they can be quite complicated. And ultimately, the data sent by that client ends up in the CargoWise system. And then information from the CargoWise system goes the opposite direction. It goes through the workflow, back out through API management to the third-party system that called us. This seemingly simple integration here allows automatic data exchange of products, receipts, orders, freight movements, customs declarations, bookings, and transport between Expand's clients and the CargoWise system that manages the business of all of the shipping and warehousing at Expand. So this is a key integration, which is where the bulk of the work that we've been doing is centered. I don't know the answer to this question, but I can ask Chris, is that how much data do we currently have going through this integration API between you and your clients?
We have on average about 500,000 calls a month going through our API currently.
Yeah. So it's certainly not insignificant, 500,000 calls a month. Yeah. So if you think about it, those calls, if they were being done manually with bits of paper and keying into CargoWise, it would be, you can just imagine the order of magnitude of productivity gain and data accuracy you've got by doing something like this. So thanks for that, Chris. That's the integration API. It's not the only integration that's been put together for Expand. We've got some more. We've got two more. This particular one is kind of the mainstream one that can be used by any client. The key is, though, with this is that in order to use this, the client has to be capable of calling that API, which means they need some technological resource of their own. They need some development skills of their own, because they need to get data out of their systems and call the API to pass it through to Expand, which means they need some development capability. Maybe they're using Azure Integration Services as well. Who knows? We don't know. Or maybe they're just developing straight against API. We don't know. But they do need development capability. The other integrations that we've done don't. So this is an interesting little angle here. And it's, I think, you know, Expand are exceptional in the fact that they've been thinking out of the box about these kind of things. And so if you think about it, if some clients of Expand use Shopify for their e-commerce engine, so their e-commerce site, then effectively Expand can offer them a standardized integration because Shopify is quite an advanced e-commerce engine. It supports APIs, it supports webhooks. And so basically what we can do from Expand's side of the equation is we can make a call to a webhook in Shopify saying, please tell me when there's a new order. Yeah. I'm simplifying things a little bit here, but that's fundamentally what we can do. And then effectively, whenever Shopify then a client orders something, it can notify us through an API, which is implemented by a function, which then stores that event in Event Grid. And then that's managed through a series of functions and logic apps all the way back to CargoWise. So what we've got here is something which is completely automatic. All the end customer needs to do is give Expand permission to access their Shopify API. And then this integration can completely automate the process. Whenever a new order is made in the Shopify e-commerce site, webhook notifies the Expand, it runs through, puts it in CargoWise. When CargoWise has shipped it, similar thing happens going the other way. CargoWise notifies it, goes through Event Hub, a function logic app, updates it back into Shopify. And so we've got an end-to-end integration for customer orders, receipts, etc., going backwards and forwards. And the customer can take advantage of this service to use Expand for their logistics, for the shipping of their products, just by giving access to their Shopify site. And the rest of this is an out-of-the-box integration that Expand provide. So this one's different to the other one in the sense that the client just needs to give advantage to use the service rather than develop something themselves. We have a similar thing to this for ERP systems as well. This is obviously specific to clients using Shopify as their e-commerce site, but we also have it for clients which are using specific enterprise resource planning systems or ERP systems, such as Sage 300 is one of them, NetSuite is another one, and Oracle Fusion is another one. So if the client is using one of those three ERP systems, then Expand have developed a specific automatic integration that will basically call out to that system saying, have you got any shipments for me? And if Expand, if their ERP system returns that, then it gets stored in a grid, handled in some functions and some logic apps, and updated in CargoWise. And it doesn't matter particularly whether they're using, you know, Oracle or NetSuite. Those systems have all got completely different APIs, but this technology is capable of knowing which type of system it is, connecting to it, grabbing all the orders, and basically managing them through into CargoWise. Again, the beauty of this is the client doesn't need to do anything other than give permission for Expand integration to access their system. The system is standard. Whether there could be 50 companies using Sage, it doesn't really matter. It's once we've got the connection, it will go out, grab that connection information, and carry out the integration automatically using the tools that Abdullah has talked to us about earlier. And this will deal with things like inventory, purchase and sales orders, and all these kind of things. And effectively, it checks whether Expand are the preferred supplier in this particular scenario, and if they are, it automates the integration completely for the customer. So this technology, together with the previous one, are effectively out-of-the-box integrations with clients that are using particular types of system at their end, making it much easier. I mean, I don't know, Chris, if you've got anything to say about it, but it would seem to me that by having a standardized integration like this one for Sage 300, for example, or Shopify, would make it much easier for customers to engage with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Customer attraction is one of them, but also faster onboarding as well. To onboard a customer is a lot faster than what it was previously with these plugins that we've got available. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. So basically, this is a, I've outlined a basic strategy for what you need to do, the basic steps of what you need to do to create an automated integration between your organization and another one. And we've looked at the 3 types of integrations that Expand have, which enable them to take advantage of this technology. All 3 developed using Azure Integration Services and the tools that Abdullah talked about earlier. So I'll hand back to you, Susanna.
Thank you very much, Jeff. That was really, really insightful, and I've certainly learned a lot today myself. It's really incredible how I think this set of technologies can support manufacturing and logistics in terms of productivity, time saving, which is so important to that sector. And the number of calls that Chris alluded to is really quite staggering, because the idea of having to do all that manually is quite a fearful prospect. So thank you very much for all of the presenters today and what they've shared with us. What I'd like to do now is ask if anybody has any questions. You're more than welcome to write them in the chat, or alternatively, if you wish to, you can ask aloud. No, I think
I've got a question.
Yay!
Yeah, Mark Carlton from ILEP Technologies. We provide manufacturing execution solutions, so kind of an adjacent space to Expand, not exactly overlapping. But I'm wondering, when we do very, very similar integrations. I mean, really, really similar in terms of what you've described, exchanging works orders or part number definitions or bill of materials definitions with ERP. So it's very interesting. What I'm wondering, to what extent you've managed to define entirely generic business logic for the mappings, and to what extent you need to extend that for particular customer implementations. So for some entities, we see it's very simple part number definitions maybe. Well, take that example, part number definitions. On the face of it, they seem entirely generic, but actually one customer might have some particular properties that are needed that are relevant to an implementation that aren't at another. Do you have a way of extending your generic out-of-the-box integrations to cope with customer-specific extensions?
Jeff, would you like to take that question?
I think Chris is going to take it, actually.
Or is Chris going to take it? Awesome.
It's a very, very good question. So obviously each individual customers. So yes, an example of Shopify, for instance, we have specific customers that have additional requirements. For instance, if we have someone that's selling shoes, for instance, their requirements are different to someone selling boxes, for instance. So the API is designed to capture them elements so we can then capture them within the ERP system itself. So it's just basically ensuring that the design of the API caters for those needs, and if needed, it can be further developed to cater for those needs, essentially.
So it might take iterations of the generic logic, but you have got a generic logic. You don't extend it to be individual to a given customer.
Exactly that. The logic is there, but we might basically extend some attributes to include the customer, if that makes sense. So the actual logic remains the same. We've got the standard logic, but there might be additional needs for that customer that we cater for within the ERP system or within the API, whatever's required.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions at all? No, in which case, in terms of next steps, we would be delighted to set up a call with any of you should you wish to go through where you are with your strategy, see what support we may be able to offer, and that will be with one of our technical experts. If you would like to take up that opportunity, then please email us at contact@transparity.com, and we'd be delighted to do that for you. In terms of just concluding this webinar, I want to thank everybody again for contributing, and in particular to Chris Pye for joining us from Expand. And I hope that you found it to be insightful. If you do wish to answer any, rather ask any further questions, then please do get in contact. And then there is a final little poll here just to see if you are interested in taking advantage of that 30 minutes of consultancy with a follow-up call. And on that note, I think that we are ready to close the webinar. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time. I hope you have a great rest of the day.